Hi, my name is Stephanie. Thank you for joining us today for our webinar, Separate IT and Business Service Catalogs. Is that the best idea? Couple quick things. We are recording the event today, so you will receive a link from me with the slides as well as the recording. Also, if you have any questions for the panelists today, please use the Q&A panel. You can access this from the top right-hand corner where the blue question mark icon is. If you would like to go to full screen mode, you may find this helpful later, especially during the demo. You can use the double arrows located to the top and right of the slide, the evergreen slide that you see in front of you right now. So again, we will get started. Please use the Q&A panel for any questions, and I'm going to turn it over to Don Casson, CEO of Evergreen Systems. Don?
Good afternoon. Thank you, Stephanie. Welcome to all of us who are not on spring break this week. So thanks for joining us. I'm Don Casson, CEO of Evergreen, and my co-presenter, as usual, is Jeff Benedict, who heads up our ITSM practice and is also a terrific solutions architect. There we are. There's three of us. So here's our agenda today. If you're new to our webinar series, thanks for joining us. Welcome. If you're a past attendee, thanks for joining us again. Our goal is to share valuable information and insights you can use in your planning and activities right now. The topic we will explore today is separate IT and business service catalogs. Is that the best idea? So after a very little bit about Evergreen, we'll dive into the topic, and it does sound simple enough, but I think there's quite a lot going on there underneath the covers. Beyond that, we'll briefly demonstrate our always evolving view of a very advanced self-service experience built on ServiceNow, and then we'll open the floor for questions if you have any. Evergreen is a U.S.-based consulting firm, and we've worked with hundreds of mid-market, Fortune 1000 companies and public sector organizations to improve their IT service management execution. We're a full lifecycle firm, meaning that we have both process and technology in one company. And we're one of the top 5 U.S. ServiceNow partners, have over a decade of domain experience in each area of the ServiceNow portfolio. But we view all of this from a perspective of customer-centric IT service management. At Evergreen, we think that conventional ITSM wisdom is wrong. It's been done the same way for the past decade: incident, problem, change, little knowledge. At the end of it, we might be running better, but so what? What about the customer? Are we making any difference for them? Or are we waiting to phase 2 or 3 to even think about them? We think this old model is broken. If you're considering moving to ServiceNow or any other platform for that matter, demand more. You need to start with the customer in phase 1. You absolutely can deliver a big customer experience improvement in phase 1. One the customer and the CIO will notice. And if you're already a couple of years into your latest journey, even more importantly, now is the time. For the past couple of years, we've been working very hard on exactly this, focusing from the customer in, not IT out, with IT and the customer evolving together from the start. Let me share a quick story, if I might. Late November, we were contacted by a prospective new client who'd been using ServiceNow for 2 years with little to show for it. She wanted to dramatically change her employee's IT experience by year end. On New Year's Eve, she went live with a beautiful new employee self-service portal and told us it was the most impactful IT project of the year. And she should know, she's the CIO. So let's get into it here. As I researched this topic, I found a lot of confusion out there. ITIL is as good a place to start as any for definitions. Determining what ITIL means or could mean, though, is kind of like reading a religious text and asking, what did God mean when he or she said, fill in the blank? The answer may be affected by the context of the question, the perspective at the time it was written, and the perspective now. If we look at the ITIL definition of the term IT Service Catalog with an E on the end, we see that it's structured, really a structured source of data with information on IT services, and that information needs to support the sale and delivery of those services. It also includes information a customer would need to make a purchase decision on a particular service. So that seems straightforward enough. Next, I look at the definition of a service. It seems there are 3 kinds: infrastructure services, which are in essence IT services delivered to other IT people, or what we call at Evergreen, internal IT services. Then there are IT services, which are what IT delivers to non-IT employees, which we call IT customer services. And last, there are business services. Now this is where it gets a little bit harder. Business services has two definitions. They can be an IT service that directly supports a business process, or they can be a service delivered to outside customers by the business. I think that can be a little confusing. So that means providing an app like SAP to people in finance is a business service. And finance people using SAP to collect money from customers is the accounts receivable business service. To me, if we're just providing SAP as an app to an employee, that sounds like an IT customer service. To make it more interesting, maybe we think email is an IT service. I think most people look at it that way. But what if finance uses email along with SAP to collect accounts receivable from customers? Then in that case, is email a business service? So you get into the detail and it becomes a little more confusing. So really what we have, I call it services, 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 and customers, customers, customers. Okay? They're everywhere. Here's a view of that conversation we just had from a visual service taxonomy perspective. At the top, IT is providing an infrastructure or internal IT service called business continuity disaster recovery in support of apparently my favorite application, SAP. The customer for this service is the IT employee who owns the app SAP. That IT employee provides a service we call SAP app to his customer, the finance department, in this case at a college. The college finance department provides the service collect amounts owed or pay your tuition online here for their reluctant customer, the college student. In reality, there is no idle definition for the term business service catalog or the technical service catalog. It's just IT service catalog. Idle envisioned, and this is my view of it, envision an IT service catalog so it was simple and logical to separate internal IT services from customer-facing IT services. And we do the same. But that's not what the world sees now. The world is beginning to see everything as a service and from the eyes of the customer for that particular service. Not just services or IT services in the service catalog. And the delivery of nearly all those services today is technology enabled. So are they not, in some fashion, IT services? Some component of them surely is. Services can be combined and recombined in hundreds or thousands of ways, with OLAs and SLAs combining and recombining at that same rate. This is the essence of a federated service catalog. Okay, so let's take a little breather. This is a more fun definition. So here's the idle definition of a service culture. It says a lot. Customer-oriented, with the KPIs, the key metrics of customer satisfaction and mission alignment. I think that's beautiful. No matter how many services, providers, and components you have, this is what the customers expect to see. Simple and hard. So we've talked a lot about the layering of services and customers, how it can quickly lead to a lot of complexity. And those of you who have been on prior webinars, you've seen this. This is kind of one of my foundational slides. As the providers, you can also see how it is very easy to get lost in the volume. So how can we manage this? The key to this is having an effective service taxonomy. A service taxonomy is a logical, repeatable way to classify the services we offer, as well as the ones we might want to. This taxonomy here of Homo sapiens is a pretty good type of taxonomy model for IT. The classification goes from very broad to specific, from millions to one. The 140-year-old Dewey Decimal System is also a good taxonomy example in use at over 200,000 libraries today. Could you imagine trying to find or reshelf a book in a library without it? So a taxonomy is a logical, extensible way to organize things, classify things, and most of them organize in categories, groups, and even subgroups as the classification gets more and more specific. They don't have to be hierarchical. They can be alphabetic listings of things as well. And this is a key point, the best type of taxonomy for you is the type that is most useful in creating and managing the services you want to offer. So let's take a look at a handful of guiding principles to help you be successful with Service Catalog and Service Taxonomy. Starting with a common understanding. I know many of you have had ITIL training. I bet you found it was much easier to discuss and develop IT service management principles and concepts with coworkers who had been through ITIL training as well. The same thing is true for moving from a silo-based, possibly inwardly focused IT organization to a services-based, outwardly focused, customer-centric organization. Building a common understanding with your team of what a service really is, who a customer is, who a provider is, and what everyone expects is essential for success. Creating a single broad taxonomy early on is really critical. We see this as a phase one must-do. At the highest level, the framework should capture the broadest view of what you see as potentially within the scope of your effort. Of course, the taxonomy can be grown or shrunk later. It's never locked down. But it's easier to start with a broad view, specifically because there's no downside to it. You don't have to use all of it right away. And you'll minimize any reclassification efforts downstream that could come from changing the taxonomy. The parts of the taxonomy are meant to be parts of a whole. And here's a simple example of a broad framework that shows line of business services, shared services, and two different types of IT categories. Here's a fairly new one we recently came up with, another example, and this is specifically designed for higher education, where in addition to the categories in the last example, we've relabeled shared services to campus services because it makes more sense to the consumers of those services in this environment, and added in-customer-facing service categories like future students, current students, alumni, and parents. If you only remember one piece of advice, remember this one. Everyone has customers. These are the people who make requests of you every day. And what you do for them are your services. Most organizational units can have a variety of customers, IT internal, IT customers, line of business, shared service, external customers, and so on. Partners, it depends on your business. I was in a taxonomy workshop last week with a VP of apps. As we discussed what is a service and who is the customer, he pointed out that he provides patching services and antivirus for the IT guy who runs SAP, but he also gets calls from non-IT employees in the business to ask for estimates on developing new functionality in their existing services or to commission new projects for new services. If you ever feel lost in this work, which will probably happen, remember two grounding questions. Who are the customers and what are the services? And they'll help bring you back. Here's another one that's really, really critical. As mentioned, we break IT services into two groups, customer-facing and internal IT. You don't have to follow this convention, but when they're mixed together, it's very confusing. Here you also see one of our principles in taxonomy, that is, the taxonomy labels are for the customer and the framework is for the providers. A service can be presented to a customer in many different ways. It may be in a what's new flashing icon or in a list of people who like this also like this. It isn't just found by drilling down the taxonomy, but any section of a taxonomy is targeted at a particular customer set. And since we want to think like the customer, then the labels in that section should be in the customer's language, not the provider's. Beyond that, the labels in the taxonomy will certainly be visible a number of different places in your service catalog or your employee portal. So they have to make sense to the customer. If you look at the two categories above, you can see the difference in the labels for the two groups. What do we mean when we say the framework is for the providers? It's the way the providers can understand the breadth and depth of services and combinations of services offered. If you had 300 services, could you understand a numbered or alphabetical list of them? Probably not. And what about combinations to yield a complex service? It would be impossible. So the framework is for the providers to help understand the services and combinations offered logically to avoid creating redundant services, to better combine existing ones, and to ensure that services are aligned with the right customer. So we use a visual mapping technology called Xmind. That's the logo there in the upper left-hand side. It's powerful, easy to use, and it's very inexpensive. A visual approach allows you to better understand the range and types of services offered, even as they reach into the hundreds. And as we said, it helps you visually see where a new service in one area might also be a benefit in another part of the taxonomy. It makes it easier to prevent duplication of services you already have, drives up reuse of existing ones, and enables you to see where combinations of existing services can more easily create a new one, rather than designing each service individually from the start. So, if we take a look at the extended taxonomy in the area of mobile services, we can see how the labels are customer-friendly, common sense terms for the target customer. And at the edge of the taxonomy, we can see that services we might offer, like mobile bundles of basic, medium, or advanced, or service activities like update or remove or add, hang right off the framework. A consistent service design process is just as important as a taxonomy. A good, consistent service design process is key to customer satisfaction, simplicity, and quality. Here we have an IT service, SAP software. I really have to put a few new ones in there. We have a description of the core functionality offered, so I can decide if this is what I'm looking for. I can see that James Vitolo is the service owner if I need to contact someone about it, and I can see that it's rated 4 out of 5 stars for quality by the customers. I can also click on it, the Request This Service button in the upper right-hand side, if I decide I want it. So a good design goal here is to provide a simple but complete description of the service and its attributes to the point where a customer can make a self-service determination. Now, it's one more point I'd like to show here that can cause a big change in IT. You see James's name published right next to the customer quality rating. Do you think James will be thinking about end-to-end services and happy customers? I think he will. It's important to apply a building block mentality constructing services, then combine the blocks to create new services and variations of existing ones. If all your services are single-threaded and custom built, they will be very expensive to create, impossible to maintain, and confusing to your customer. Think about Amazon. What would it be like if every Amazon department had its own checkout procedure? That wouldn't be very good. But this idea has its own challenges too. Each service module, let's say financial approval process, could be used in hundreds of services. So service configuration management is mandatory, with each service being managed as a configuration item and mapped into any combined services of which it is part. If that particular app or that service financial approval process is used in hundreds of services, you can't just change it willy-nilly. You notice I didn't use any idle CMDB diagrams, and I didn't say CMDB, because the CMDB has a bad reputation as a solution in search of a problem. It's important to look past that, though, and use it for managing your services, or I'm afraid you'll be lost. Okay, so that was a lot of information to cover in one session. I wanted to sort of wrap it up by going to the 30,000-foot level here and remember what we're really trying to achieve and where we're headed with a visual customer-centric services roadmap. And just real quickly, this is a 3-phase kind of roadmap, and we've classified the phases by color. And of course, your phases can vary. This is a general statement, with blue being phase 1, orange phase 2, and the purple blocks being phase 3. If you look at the blue line down the middle here, right there, above the line is what the customer sees or experiences. Below the line is what IT sees and delivers from a service portfolio perspective. Okay, so that gets us to the end of our presentation part, and we're going to shift gears here, and Jeff is going to show you some of the concepts we've been working on that align with this in the actual employee self-service portal. Are you
Thanks,
on mute, Jeff?
No,
okay.
I'm here. So thanks, Don. So just Stephanie or Don, can you pass me the ball?
Yes, I could do that, couldn't I? There you go. And I will remind everyone as I'm doing that, when Jeff does this demo, you might want to go to full screen. So those are those double arrows just above the right-hand corner of his presentation slide that will bring you to full screen.
Awesome.
Thanks,
Thank
Jeff.
you. So Don kind of showed this in the slideshow in terms of the mind map software and a visual representation of our different taxonomies. And I wanted to start here because I wanted to kind of show you these different branches in terms of IT services versus shared services and kind of how we put those into, say, a ServiceNow self-service portal. So obviously you have some services out here that you kind of showed, things like access and security, fall into IT customer services, and might have stuff like single sign-on or Active Directory fall into here. On the shared services side, we branch out into things like HR and facilities and procurement. Right, and under HR, you're going to have some of your things like payroll and role changes, on-offboarding, and other various aspects. So kind of where this fits into kind of, I guess, where we can present some of these services or these taxonomies inside of ServiceNow or inside of this self-service portal. So I'm looking at what we've built, which is our kind of self-service portal solution on top of the content management system in ServiceNow. And the user can go to the, say, service catalog section and consume the different kind of service taxonomies and different service definitions that are out there. And Don mentioned part of the purpose for displaying this is to provide that kind of customer transparency, clarify your expectations, and also kind of bridge that gap between the language of how a customer sees their services and how you fulfill or deliver those services. Now, one thing I want to highlight, you'll notice at the top here I've got an option that's defaulted to all catalogs. But I've got some ways to filter my list here. I can go in and say, let's look at facility-specific services. And you'll see some of those same things that are represented on that mind map in terms of the organization and the services that are defined there. Go back to IT. So information services, notice I've got other various categories and items here that are specific to that as well. And the other thing you'll notice is once I've selected this filter, my A to Z list is filtered based off of that, as well as my other various pages that I have. One thing I want to mention before I transition there is that also based off the user's role and their role within the organization, you may end up specifically filtering which categories, which catalogs are available for them, and ultimately just showing the services that are relevant to them and their job function. So the other pages that are kind of represented here, so if I'm in the catalog of information services, the My Services section is showing me as a consumer what are the services that I'm specifically subscribed to. And this is either via my relationship to a department or a group, or an individual, maybe individually being subscribed to these items. Another option is you kind of highlight here, notice here there's some ratings and stars that are being applied. There's also a page here for what are the highest rated items. And that's based off of facilitating that feedback throughout the fulfillment activities, as well as via this portal, being able to come in here and provide the reviews and feedback on the individual service items. As a consumer, obviously, I can always browse through the A to Z list to find my items. Maybe the most common way I might find for a service might be via a search. And it's also common that you would kind of use aliases or other kind of common terms to represent these services. So notice here I'm searching for VPN and I still find private token access. So you might have different ways of referring to the same services, and you can use the aliases or keywords to kind of associate those to your different service items and help it make it easier for your consumers to find the service they're looking for. Let me go back to my category view. So as I go through this, I can go through items like finance and see what services are in the finance category. I'll kind of stay with Don's theme. He showed a lot of SAP Financial, so we'll look at that service here. And again, what I'm presenting here as far as the service to the consumer is the information about that service. Who owns it? What can I expect when I get this service? What are the items that are in scope, out of scope? We're also providing some health information. What's the status or health of this service over a period of time? Here's where I would go and provide various feedback and review the ratings and feedback that others have submitted. And I can also look at kind of providing some of my other contextual information, such as knowledge articles or other helpful tutorials that might be relevant to this service in this context. Also notice I do have my request this service option, so if I were to go and click this, this is where I could order my particular service and become a subscriber and a consumer of that particular service. One other kind of attribute that's not represented on SAP Financials but is represented on this, say, bond trading is this concept of offerings. So I might have, for a service, I might have different kind of flavors or offerings that people can subscribe into. In this case, we've got based off of location. We have a different bond trading service for New York versus the London area. And then you can also see this is where we're outlining some specific commitments as to how we're delivering to this service. And most of these are measurables, either from an availability target perspective or a responsiveness perspective. I think the last page I didn't cover was service health. So we looked at kind of the health on the individual service perspective. Notice I can also look at this, and again, I'm sliced into just my information services here. But I can see here the outages and alerts as it pertains to the services within that taxonomy. Continue plan maintenance activities, as well as the kind of a more macro view of the service items out there and how they've been performing. And I can see certain services are not doing as well. This one's been down for 5 days or more as part of my service tree and taxonomy. So let me shift gears a little bit, and let's kind of dig into that shared services area. And I specifically wanted to kind of highlight that ServiceNow is positioned to be not just an IT service management platform, but an enterprise service management platform, which represents services beyond IT. A couple examples that I've kind of shown through that taxonomy list are things like facilities. There's a specific application for facilities and facility service automation. There's also one specific for human resources. And I want to show you, kind of take a closer look at some of these applications and kind of show you how these can kind of branch beyond your IT services and kind of provide kind of that customer experience that goes not just from an IT services delivery. But before I go there, let me just highlight for purposes of HR kind of where this application fits into the mix. So I have one slide here just to kind of show kind of the role of HR service automation as it pertains to ServiceNow. So these are kind of your core process areas in terms of managing HR, admin, payroll, your talent management, your workforce management, and some of your common tools you have out there. We're a user of ADP, but sure many of you use SAP, PeopleSoft, and Workday is very popular as well. So ServiceNow is not displacing these, but is made to be a complement to these particular technologies and tools for HR, but to provide that case management also and provide a delivery of content and knowledge to consumers of HR services. So with that said, let's take a look at HR as an application. So I can go into, first of all, the dashboard page for HR. It's providing me some kind of breakdown of my HR cases by the different categories, so my benefits versus onboarding, offboarding. I get some workforce management activities here of my team of HR individuals, who's got the biggest workload. Further, as you come down, we can kind of slice that both ways in terms of looking at the types of items or the types of cases that are coming in and who's working those. Right. Let me now kind of toggle back to the portal real quick, and let's kind of go through the consumer side of this house. So if I go back to human resources, right, so here's my various services that are in human resources that my consumers can see. So I have something like onboarding, right? I can come in here and I can see what can I expect from an employee onboarding process and a service delivery perspective. I can also come out and initiate a new onboarding request, which would start that HR case and the workflow behind that of delivering either onboarding a new employee and or contractor. Further, I have services such as, let's say, benefits. And in here, I've got a service that I can then submit a benefits question on. So let's go submit a benefits question. And maybe my question is, need my latest 401k statement. Can't seem to get that worked out. So as a consumer, I can come submit that question. And it comes out to my kind of common status page within my portal. And notice here I've got mixing both my HR cases and HR case management along with my IT ones. I've got IT incidents, I've got IT service requests, I've got items awaiting my approval, and I've also got my specific HR cases, and I've got 2 submitted. And I can see the workflow of these in terms of it's requested, being worked, and ultimately consumed or closed out and completed. I can also provide updates or request to be contacted and kind of interact with my fulfiller through this means. Now behind this, some of the things that ServiceNow has employed to facilitate the delivery or the completion of, say, an HR case is they use what's called some of these models, so I can have kind of a template in essence that might drive my fulfillment activities. And this kind of is like a mini workflow. It's intended to be a simpler process to, say, the graphical workflow editor of ServiceNow. But I can take something like an employee relations question kind of submission and say, this is my template I want to apply to that. That may go through, in this case, 3 different tasks that are sequenced. One that goes first to an HR director for review, one that ultimately results in an activity to have a formal meeting with the employee, and then lastly, an HR review to kind of complete that whole process. So let's look at the case I just submitted from a fulfiller provider perspective. So here's my kind of case I submitted in this HR service automation application. And for those that use ServiceNow and use Incident Management, you'll see this, the information that's collected here is very similar in that I have a short description, I've got who's my contact, location, my assignment group, and individual who's assigned to it. There are a few other different elements in here. One, a quick view in terms of other HR cases submitted for this same individual, and this can be helpful in the perspective of, is there a trend? Is there some sort of common thread that this person keeps looking for information or aid in? And how can I, maybe there's some sort of common activity that's going on. Also, I mentioned the HR task. There can be an element of multiple work activities that make up the fulfillment of a given HR case. Now, one thing you'll notice here is that this got routed directly to a group and an individual, and we didn't specifically choose those. That was done through a rule. And that's defined down here in this assignment lookup rules. So in this case, I can define a rule that says anything categorized as benefits, go and assign that to Ramon in our HR group. And this allows us to kind of assign our skills or focus areas to those specific individuals that might be best suited to meet and deliver those particular skills. One last thing on HR service automation that makes it a little unique and different from that of some of the other applications is there is a section of this application that has kind of HR profile data. And this is different than kind of the user data inside of ServiceNow in that there, for one, are different security models around this data because there is some sensitivity here. So who can access it, who can update it, and who can view this information is controlled through different roles and profiles. And so some of the things you see here are my employment status. You see some date of birth, marital status, gender, things that are relevant to HR and can be helpful in terms of supporting the individuals in their life cycles. Also, you see kind of my employment history, the positions I've held and where I've moved. So when we talk about things like onboarding and role changes and offboarding, these are some of the specific attributes that are going to be adjusted as we are changing people's roles or moving them, moving them into our organization or out of our organization. The last thing worth noting on here is you notice this concept of position and its department and position. So this is a way, and specifically relevant to some services like onboarding and role changes, where you can define a profile around your different organizations and different titles, and ultimately define here's the access they need, here's the equipment they need, and here's some of the attributes that are relevant to this particular position, and use that as a mechanism to be more automated in your delivery of those particular services. So let's take a quick look at facilities just to kind of counterbalance this. So similarly with facilities, you've got a dashboard page to kind of break down the different facilities requests by their types, temperature issues versus cleaning, health, right? We've got seeing some trends by month. Might also be more relevant to see things from a building management perspective. Where are different requests from the buildings? And then we have some work management activities here of who's got our workload from an individual assignment perspective, as well as what facility requests are still outstanding that haven't been accepted and worked. One other interesting kind of feature that you have in facilities automation is this visual perspective of floor plans. And what you can do is you can upload an image of your floor plan, and these can be for different buildings and ultimately different floors within the building, and ultimately kind of define the different rooms and locations that are in here. And so what you do is you kind of upload your image, and then you come out here, and I'm going to show labels so you can see we've labeled a number of these different rooms and elements of this plan. So I can then take my room marker, drag that to a new location. And so that's kind of how I would define this. So I can define, say, Bronco room, and maybe I want to call this an office. And then all of a sudden I've got a tag out here. And then the other thing I can do is then I can use this as a way to manage my requests and demand for a given floor plan. So I can drop a new request to that particular location, and maybe I've got a temperature issue going on in our Bronco room, and maybe we'll say temperature control issue in Bronco room. Right, and then I've got an issue reported there. Right, and I can also see maybe as someone working incidents on the floor, I can come out here and look at, well, look at this, I've got the Davy Jones rooms actually has 3 open requests for repairs. Let's do all these together since we're in that same general location, and let's solve all these problems all in one, kind of all in one fell swoop. So let's just kind of go back to the portal for a second. Let me show you the facilities. Let's go toggle facilities. So as you'd expect, I can kind of look at these various services, and I'd say take a look at something like janitorial services, for example, and I'm going to see, what is the service, what can I expect from it, as well as my ability to, in this case, report a janitorial specific issue and get that support I need with those particular services. Lastly, to kind of close this out, let me just kind of highlight that, again, ServiceNow is strategically focused on extending the platform to enterprise service management and focusing on things beyond IT. The latest release, Fuji, that just came out, also has 3 new applications in the same kind of space: legal, marketing, finance, and all those same components I showed as far as case management, ways to consume the different services are also in play with those same kind of non-IT service areas. So that kind of wraps up what I hope to show you today. I do appreciate your time, and I hope this was helpful in kind of sparking thoughts about Service Catalog, but also extending your solutions beyond IT.
Thank you, Jeff. Yeah, it was very interesting. I noticed you brought up Davy Jones, but he seemed to have a broken locker. That's a terrible Navy joke. Okay, so you found
welcome to our world, folks.
He's like my Ed McMahon.
Boom.
Thank you. If you found this interesting and you wonder, hey, what might be a logical next step, here are a couple of options from Evergreen. If you are interested in the employee self-service portal and the things that Jeff was demonstrating, it is available as a self-service demo, and you can get your own login on our website and follow the front page banner, and then you can play with it to your heart's content. If you're looking for a better way to organize and categorize services, you can access a short demo video of our Service Taxonomy Mind Map application on our website as well, and we'd be happy to show you in great depth if you're interested beyond that. Or perhaps, and this is one that's become very popular, perhaps you're considering a broader service catalog initiative but aren't sure where to start. We do offer a one-day private service catalog workshop on your site, and I say for up to 15 attendees, but we've had some that are 20 attendees now. So you can handle quite a few people. It's designed to educate your team, uncover key business drivers and roadblocks, and create a common language and direction to get your team on the same page. You can literally save months of effort in consensus building and building a lingua franca or communications basis to get your program moving. I think it's a pretty good value at $39.50, That includes travel costs, and it's really our way to meet prospective new clients as well and to get people that are stuck moving forward. So that's really all we've got to present today, and we can open it up to Stephanie, any questions that have come in?
Yes, and we've gotten quite a few. And Jeff, I'm going to start with you, and the first question I'm going to ask, I had a question about the ServiceNow version that you were using for the demo. Was that the Fuji version?
So I was primarily in the Eureka version. Some of the, I guess the HR case model elements were a new introduction in Fuji. So I did show those from a Fuji specific instance, but for the most part, I was in a Eureka instance.
Okay, great. Thank you. So this is a two-part question for you, Jeff. The first part is, how are the indicators of the services updated? Manual by service manager or automatic as a result of performance monitoring?
So I think when you say indicators, kind of the feedback and the health, or is that what I'm assuming?
It might be the service health dashboard indicators, Jeff.
So the service health indicators, they could be created by the service managers to go out. They're basically sourced from, there's a table in ServiceNow called outages, which can be used to, kind of a misnomer a bit because you can use them for planned maintenance as well as degradation of service, which may not necessarily be an outage. But they're sourced from records within that table. Now those records could be created manually by a service manager to say this particular service is degraded or out or in an outage state. But typically they'd be sourced from, say, an event management solution. And in a lot of cases, they may be sourced from using your CMDB and your relationships of your components that make up a service, right? So we talk about SAP Financials. That might be made up of a number of servers and databases and web components and things of that nature that you'd want to relate together. And so chances are the outage would be a cascading outage from the, a database being down that would then reflect your SAP Financial Services being down as well.
Okay, great. Thanks, Jeff. Also, the same person asked me as a follow-up to that question, how granular is the access to the service catalog entries? Can they be assigned service by service so that different groups can manage their own services and not be able to goof up the other entries?
Yeah, so I mean, certainly as far as the service owner kind of perspective in managing your different services, you can certainly apply a number of different access controls around how you'd want to, I guess, protect the edits and the management of the service definition. In a lot of cases, what we'd see is that certain attributes may be restricted to the service owner as the only person who can edit and adjust those attributes, and maybe some that may be more of a delegated management activity. But this, it's kind of one of those things you want to work out as part of your service design package, and what kind of controls you would need to put in place to kind of manage the actual service lifecycle and editing, say, SAP Financials or bond trading as a service definition.
Okay, great. Thanks, Jeff. A couple of quick questions that I actually can answer. First of all, we have a question asking if there are portions of the catalog design workshop available at Knowledge 15. I will mention that we will be exhibiting at Knowledge 15. We'll be in booth 600. We certainly invite you to come by, meet Jeff, meet Don. They will both be there. Also, one of our consultants, Nabil, is presenting at CreatorCon. So you definitely want to take a look at the agenda. Jeff, are you presenting as well?
No, I will obviously be there to answer questions and demo anything at our booth, but I have no scheduled sessions.
Okay. Well, we will definitely put you to work doing demos in the booth. Also, for those of you who have asked, yes, you will get a link to both the recording of this event and a copy of the slides in the email from me. Jeff, going back to you for questions, can you discuss how ServiceNow differs from the IBM Control Desk?
I probably can't. I'm not as familiar with IBM Control Desk as I think would be, I guess, appropriate to answer that accurately. But we could certainly, follow up and take a look at IBM Control Desk, and and certainly can have a follow-up conversation from this with who the individual is if we want to dig in a little deeper about pros and cons between one solution versus the other.
I don't know either. All I could think it's probably derived from Main Control's product originally and their service desk, but that's just a guess.
Jeff, can ServiceNow be integrated with document management workflow for HR use?
So, I mean, certainly it can be integrated to a number of different technologies. There, you know, I'm not aware of anything that's a specific plugin in that space for document management. I will say there is a document management aspect of ServiceNow that you can actually do a lot of the SharePoint-like kind of management of check-in, check-out natively within ServiceNow. We have seen other customers that have integrated you know, ServiceNow with SharePoint to get documents that are in SharePoint visible in ServiceNow and things of that nature. But so I mean, I think I'm not sure of anything that's a pre-packaged plug and play, but certainly there's a lot of integration capabilities with ServiceNow to be able to kind of support that use case.
Yeah, I mean, the philosophy there really is, you know, you want to leave the work that's being done where it makes the most sense to be done, and this is a terrific, you know, workflow. Forms-based workflow tool. It's a great design package from that standpoint, so it allows you to connect the dots from start to finish in a very effective way.
Great. And Jeff, I'm also being asked, what about integration between ServiceNow and Salesforce? Can you comment on that?
So there has been a plugin for Salesforce that has existed for a period of time. It's a little bit out of date in that Salesforce has matured to more of a REST-based web service API, as is ServiceNow, and they really haven't updated that to match the newer technology. But there is a solution out there that can be leveraged to integrate Salesforce with ServiceNow. It's primarily the use cases that are modeled with that packaged integration are mostly sharing Salesforce cases to ServiceNow incidents and back and forth. But it is expandable to handle any object in Salesforce being integrated into ServiceNow.
Okay, great, thank you, Jeff. This question's for Don. Don, you said early on you said conventional ITSM wisdom, like focusing on incident, problem, and change first, was wrong. These have been the best practices for a long time, so why do you think it's different now?
That's a good point. You know, now it's different in a couple of ways. First, probably most importantly, the technology we're using is dramatically better than what we used to have in the client-server days. ServiceNow is, and I just mentioned this, is a very powerful forms-based workflow platform. And in the past, the process was the easy part. The technology was hard. Now both parts are really good. So it is time to think differently, to start with the customer first, along with the core ITSM stuff, because you can. And you can make a huge difference. It's good for them, and it's actually even better for you.
Great, thanks, Don. Let's see, I think both of you will probably want to weigh in on this one. What is a strategic approach to balance the amount of information needed to provide the services versus the amount of information required from the requester? Seems much more info is needed to build an application than needed to request. Don's pondering. I can see the smoke coming out the ears. Yeah.
Say it one more time.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
One more time. Sorry, it's hard for me to read sometimes on the QA screen. What is the strategic approach to balance the amount of information needed to provide the services versus the amount of information required from the requester? Much more info needed to build an application than needed to request.
Okay. Yeah, that's a really, really good question, because it gets to the trade-off between two of the principles in design we use, which is complete and simple, right? Because you can imagine complete and simple would fight with each other, right? And so they have to be balanced. They are in conflict by definition. And you've got to have a certain amount of information to provide the service accurately and correctly. At the same light, you want to minimize what you require of the customer from a self-service perspective to get where they're going, right? And the key there, I think, really is on both sides, that you want to create, on the provider side, you want to focus on creating and automating very, very repetitive, very high volume kinds of service requests, right? To get those out of your hands. It doesn't require a lot of brain work to do those things. And when you're doing that, it's also very logical at the same time to you know, to allow through self-service to enable that person on the other end to give you most of what you need. And kind of the principle we have, we call it balanced design, which means give them what they want to get what you need. And if you architect it correctly, I mean, it's funny, just by asking the customer only one time for information fields instead of 5 times in the process can be a refreshing improvement, right? And how many times are there forms and things people have to do where it's repetitive what's being asked of them? So the idea is to balance that thing and look at how much time someone spends to actually make a request fly and make sure it's the minimal while getting you what you need. If you do it right, though, you're going to know what those request points are, and you can automate the work that comes from them. So that, you know, if there's 3 choices someone can make in a drop-down, each one of those choices has an automation routine that runs from that, so that you really don't have to do anything. And we built the Enterprise App Store application with that in mind. It runs without involvement, basically. You know, where you have hundreds of applications being downloaded by over 100,000 people, and IT never touches it unless it breaks, right? And it's just a matter of this balanced design approach.
Okay, great. Thanks, Don. Jeff, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I think Don said it pretty well. Obviously, there's a bit of a dance there of getting the needs of your fulfillers, you know, them getting the information they need to properly fulfill a service request, but also, you know, trying to make sure we don't burden the consumer or requester. And I think, as Don indicated, we tend to see more and more examples where, to date, a lot of our customers are kind of starting at a point where they're kind of fulfiller-focused and not customer-focused, and a lot of the questions and inputs they're requiring the requesters to put in, you know, are push the burden on the customer, not on the fulfiller. And, you know, we obviously want to kind of move that pendulum to where it's a little more balanced.
Yeah, that's a good point, too. You don't want to make the customer do IT's work. And a lot of times that work can be automated.
Jeff, I've got another question for you. It says, is the self-service portal you showed today dependent on any third-party technology, or is it all native ServiceNow code?
So it's all native ServiceNow code. I mentioned it's kind of ServiceNow has a content management system, which is an application where you kind of build your own kind of web presentations. Most cases, the use case is to build a self-service portal. So it's not dependent on anything third party, but there are some common web components that we utilize. For example, we use kind of a third-party web toolkit called Foundation that we use for the responsive framework and some of the tabs and drop-down buttons. We also utilize kind of a library called Font Awesome for the icons, and then kind of throughout we use jQuery and AngularJS for some of the client-side JavaScript that drives some of that behavioral aspects that you might have seen today.
Okay, great. Thanks, Jeff. Jeff, another question for you. Do we require a separate license for the HR and facility service automation applications that you presented today?
Good question. And I think, first of all, these applications are relatively new in that the HR service automation application was introduced in Dublin, and facilities was introduced in Eureka. So if you're using kind of an older version, Calgary, Berlin, Aspen, or even before, obviously you'd have to upgrade before you could utilize these apps. That's one aspect. Further, I mentioned finance, legal, marketing, or just came out with Fuji. So obviously if you wanted to use the full suite of service automation applications, you'd have to upgrade to Fuji or start on Fuji. I will say this, so ServiceNow did recently change the way they license these applications. So now it's, you get these as part of your service automation suite, which I suspect the majority of ServiceNow customers out there probably already own this suite, because this is kind of the one that covers traditional ITIL processes like incident, problem, and change. So the only thing to kind of keep in mind there, you would have to kind of, you have to cover, you may have new users that you'd introduce as fulfillers to support those processes, right? You might have HR, facilities, personnel that you bring on board, so you'd have to make sure you have appropriate fulfiller licenses to cover potential new users in those organizations.
Okay, great. Jeff, I think I've got one more for you, and I believe my other ones queued up are for Don. So last one for you for now is, can you explain how the floor plans work?
Yeah, so I kind of covered that, in terms of going through the plans. But in essence, what you do is, chances are you have some floor plan, or the company might have some floor plan software in there that you already have today to manage. Kind of here's the graphical presentation of a floor plan. In most cases, those have it export to create a picture of what that floor plan looks like, and you might see those around your office in terms of, highlighting emergency exits or other notable information about a floor. So I think once you have a picture, it's a matter of just uploading that picture, associating it to kind of a building and a floor record to denote which building and floor is linked to that floor plan. And then after that, you use kind of the visualizer as I kind of went through, where you go and drag the marker to the different offices and in conference rooms and tag those. And then you use the, use that same floor plan to actively drag and plot requests to the different locations. I will note, too, that one of the things I didn't cover today is that from a self-service consumer perspective, that floor plan could also be used, right? You could present to your requesters, here's the floor plan that you're on, and basically drag a new request to that location you want to report an issue, and have that be a way for them to actually submit their request. And link it to the appropriate location.
Great, thanks, Jeff. Don, this one's for you. It says, this all seems like a lot of work to add on top of iTeams that are already flat out. How does that work?
Well, it is a lot of work over time. But I guess the best thing you could say about it is that it's not new work. You're already delivering all of these services today. These are not new things we're creating, but you're delivering them in probably the most painful manual way possible. So the good news is, for most of our clients, the IT people are the process, and we use that phrase a lot. So there's great room for improvement. And we didn't talk a lot about workflow here. We show a lot of things around the front end, and you see the status of workflow, but we didn't really go much into actual workflow today. But by rationalizing, simplifying, and automating, and that's the mantra we use in workflow, right? We can change IT's role from being the process to managing the process. So it may be a little more work getting going, but in the long run, it's going to be getting you out of the work you don't really want to be doing.
Great, thanks, Don. Don, another question for you about the service taxonomy. In some ways, seeing the visual service taxonomy really makes it clear how big and complex this actually is. What are your thoughts on the process for managing a taxonomy?
Ooh, that's a good question. That's the right one to think about, too. It's really important to carefully manage the service taxonomy, and because it's such a critical part of what you're doing, right? It's how you keep things running. And it also to ensure that the visual taxonomy, if you use a visual taxonomy, and I highly recommend you do, it's such a powerful tool for this kind of thing. And the visual taxonomy and the taxonomy in ServiceNow that you put into the platform remain synchronized. We recommend that you define and follow a process that ensures that, and then put it under your formal change or configuration control functions or processes. So use change control to manage changes to the taxonomy and then flowing through into the platform as well.
Okay, great. I'm looking. I don't think we have any other questions. So give it one more minute here. Give me a second to scroll through. And all right, I think we have hit them all. So I want to thank everyone for attending. And as I mentioned earlier, you will be getting a link to the slides and the recording from me no later than Friday morning. So thank you once again, and we'll see you on the future events.